And Senator John McCain is returning to his home state of Arizona. He recently was endorsed by both of Mitt Romney's hometown newspapers. For more presidential campaign schedule information, news, video, and highlights, visit C-SPAN's site for political information, campaignetwork.org.
Earlier this week, Texas Republican Ron Paul attended a breakfast in Bedford, New Hampshire. The Politics and Eggs Breakfast, a key campaign stop for presidential candidates, is hosted by the New England Council and the New Hampshire Political Library. This is about 50 minutes.
Thank you. I deeply appreciate that, and I am very pleased to visit so many people so early in the morning. And I guess you're used to getting out in the cold, but, you know, I had to even put a sweater on today. And coming from Texas, you know, it's a little bit warmer there. But it is a delight to be here. I was actually raised in cold weather up in Pittsburgh before I went to Texas when I was taken into the service. But I want to thank the New England Council as well as the New Hampshire Political Library for hosting this. This is very nice, and I am very pleased to come out and visit. You know, when I first walked in, I saw three very familiar faces, and I want to introduce them because they're up here campaigning, and they happen to be my three granddaughters, and that is Valerie, Laura, and Lisa. They're back in the corner. Stand out. So with granddaughters like that, how can you go wrong with campaigning? You know, they're out knocking on doors. And, you know, the nice thing about campaigning in New Hampshire is there's a different attitude. You know, people who have a libertarian streak in them, you know, don't like to bother people. We like to be left alone ourselves, and we don't like to bother other people. And I've always had that streak in me where I'm reluctant to go into a restaurant and just go up and interrupt people. But tell you what, my staff will encourage me. No, in New Hampshire, you got to do that. You got to talk to the people and shake hands. But when you do it up here, you don't get very many, if any, frowns. Most of them are very interested, and, you know, and you're well received here, and there'll be a question. It's almost like they expect you to do it, and I enjoy that because I don't feel like I'm imposing on people when I come and say hello and shake their hands and interrupt their meals. But it is a real delight to be here. And it is true there's something going on significantly with the campaign and what's going on in this country. And I'm asked that continuously, and you know, about the fundraising, because you know, you can have enthusiasm, you can have a staff, you can have views that you think are very good, but you might not get any attention. And the attention seems to have come when the proof of the pudding was that there were a large number of people willing to send money. Even when there was enthusiasm on the internet, especially after the debates, we would get a sudden burst of attention on our website and a burst of donations. Back then, a burst was $50,000. And $50,000 a day is not bad when you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to call up anybody. You didn't have to pay money for direct mail, and you didn't have to pay any commissions. But now it's it's gotten out of control, and I don't know what to do about it. I mean, the money just keeps coming in. And so there is something really significant going on. So if it's the message, in one way it's sort of sad, because the message that I have is the message of America. It was said that I'm a champion of freedom. And if I had to summarize one word of what the campaign's all about, it's champion the cause of freedom and the Constitution that protects our freedom. And we talk about hope for America. We talk about peace, a different foreign policy. And if we do all these things, we have prosperity, and we really don't have to worry about our future. But if we don't do anything, we better be worried about our future. And I talk about those problems. So I find it interesting, though I spend most of my time in a speech or at a rally talking about the problems that we face, whether it's our overextension in foreign policy, our runaway spending, the runaway welfare state, the attack on our dollar, the problems are overwhelming. You know, we've been involved in medical care. The government's been involved for 30-some years, and nobody seems to be happy with medical care. The cost goes up, quality goes down, the doctor's unhappy, the doctors are quitting. and the expense goes up. So we have these many problems, and yet I see that they can be solved if we look to our traditions. Sometimes I'm accused about going backwards to the old days. Oh yeah, he'd be a good candidate for the 19th century. But you know, the ideas of freedom are very new. If you look at all of history, most of history has been that of tyrants, kings and dictators, and it's been just a few years in the course of 6,000 years of history where the creative energy of free people has actually been released. And that is what we had in this country, and that's why we were the freest and the most prosperous. But something's happening today because everything has been undermined. The principle of the marketplace, the principle of property rights, the principle of contracts, the principle of sound money, it's been undermined. And actually our foreign policy has undermined our stature around the world. Today we're not well received. We're seen as being a bully, as telling everybody what to do, and if we don't like them, we put on sanctions. If they don't obey us, we bomb them. And then if they don't obey, then we invade them. And so we don't have a good reputation around the world. And besides, we're going bankrupt. I mean, we can't even run the war. We can't even run the welfare state without borrowing a lot of money from where? From the communists. Of course, the communists now are rather capitalistic. They sell us a lot of stuff. And we borrow money. And we print the money. And they take our money and then they loan it back to us. Actually, if they deny continuing to loan us the money to subsidize our current account deficit, the dollar is going to collapse. And they're not taking our dollars as readily, and that's why the dollar is down. And it is the measurement of our economic crisis that we're facing. It is the value of the dollar. I remember well the crisis of the 1970s. Matter of fact, it was the breakdown of a monetary system that was devised, and I don't blame anybody in New Hampshire for it, but it was devised right here in New Hampshire. And that was the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. It was a false gold standard. It was a gold exchange standard. The dollar was to be linked to gold, and the dollar was going to be as good as gold. And even back then, an Austrian economist by the name of Henry Hazlitt, who befriended von Mises, the great Austrian economist, said it won't work. It's going to fail. And I read the Austrian economists in the 60s, and they predicted it would fail. It failed in 1971, and it ushered in the age of stagflation. And we were paying the bills for the 60s, living beyond our means. The expansion of the welfare state, as well as the war. Another war that we should have never been in, all that loss of life and loss of wealth, and then we finally had to leave, and we had to pay the bills, though. And paying the bills meant inflation, devaluation. All debt, when it gets beyond a certain level, you can't really pay it off by hard work. You get rid of the debt at a national level by defaulting on the debt, and you default not by not sending out the checks, you default by debasing the currency. Matter of fact, if you study Keynesian economics, it's deliberate because there's no other way they claim to do it. If they think, Keynesians think if wages have to go down in a recession, you want to lower real wages by devaluing the currency. So it's a deliberate policy that they face. But we had to pay the bills. I got interested in politics. I first ran in 1974 over the monetary issue. And if many of you here, I'm sure, remember the 70s. 1971, it was August 15th, and Nixon got on the air on a Sunday night and announced we are going to close the gold window, we're going to have wage and price controls, and we're going to put a 10% tariff on all imports. This is devastating policy. And yet the next day, the stock market went up the highest in one day in our whole history. And I thought, there is something wrong with this picture. But my assumptions were correct because the 70s turned out to be a bad decade. To save the dollar and save the economy in the 1970s, we had to have interest rates to go to 21%. Today's the conditions are very similar but much worse because we have a foreign debt that's $2.7 trillion, a national debt of $9 trillion. We spend $1.4 billion a day just for interest. We have a current account deficit of over $800 billion a year, and it cannot be sustained because our good jobs have gone overseas. Our wealth is much smaller than it was back then. So just raising interest rates to 21%, as Volcker did, to pull the dollar out of the nosedive, even then, we had to go begging to the IMF, and the IMF bailed out the dollar. But they patched it together and kept the dollar bubble going. But that's what we have now. We have a dollar bubble based on what we spend on our foreign policy and what we spend on our domestic policy. We know what a NASDAQ bubble is all about, and people lost a couple dollars there, and they were a little bit unhappy. So the shift went to housing. So you know, Alan Greenspan took interest rates down artificially low, and the principle of Austrian economics is when you artificially lower interest rates below the market, business people and consumers will do dumb things. They will cause the malinvestment, they will overinvest in certain industries. So it's not the consequence of rising prices that is the only concern about inflating the currency. That's only part of it. The real trouble is the malinvestment, the misdirection of investments. So when the interest rates went down in the 90s to the degree that people went wildly into the NASDAQ, that had to collapse. Then the next stage was raise the, create a housing bubble and securitize these things and sell them around the world and keep this bubble going. And there'll be inflation, the price of your house goes up, and the consumers say, I'm so wealthy, my $100,000 house is worth $150,000 now. I'll go out and I'll keep consuming. I'll borrow against this until interest rates change, until that bubble bursts. And we're in the midst of that, and I think it has a long way to go. But I don't even think that's the big bubble. The big bubble is the world malinvestment and dependency on the dollar. It still is the reserve currency of the world. With a gold standard, you have to adjust it on a daily basis. You have to pay. You run out of gold, you have to live, you have to cut back until that gold comes back in. It's self-adjusting. But in the paper standard, if you have the privilege of printing the gold, which is the dollar, you get to export paper. And then our jobs go with it. And that is the difficulty. That is why it's so hard now to really maintain the standard of living here. Unemployment is low. A lot of people say the economy is great, but there should be some concern because if you talk to low middle income and middle class people today, they're hurting. They can't pay their bills. They can't pay their heating bills. If you're retired and you're on Social Security, your inflation rate, your prices, your cost of living is going up probably 10%, and the government says don't sweat it. Inflation is only 2%, so the cost of living increase is 2%. They can't keep up. It is very annoying to people like that, and they don't know how to figure it out, and it has to do with the monetary system, so that has to be adjusted. But what we really need to do is look at the real causes of our problem, and it's been going on for 100 years. We changed our tax system. We thought that we had to get rid of a system where we didn't have an income tax, so 1913, our country decided taxing income, which long-term is devastating, and it's a crisis point. It's unconstitutional the way they collect it. We're guilty until proven innocent. We have to testify against ourselves, and it's devastating because it means the government owns all our income, and they allow us to keep a certain percentage under certain conditions. That's why I'm absolutely, opposed to the income tax. But at the same time, we introduced the notion of the Federal Reserve, which means if we can't tax enough and can't borrow enough, we just print the money. It makes no sense whatsoever. And they think this is a silly idea to talk about backing a currency with something and restraining the government. But if you allow governments to print the money, there's no restraint on government because they can always resort to the inflation tax, which is an invisible tax, and it hurts the very people that we're supposed to be helping. That the ones who have all the welfare programs, we got to take care of the poor, the education, medical care. How do they do it? Deficit financing, print the money, and prices go up, and the very people they're trying to help are really hurt. If you look at the countries that have had long histories of paper currencies that come and go, such as countries south of ours, you don't have much of a middle class. You have a large poor class and a large wealthy class. That's what's happening in this country today. The middle class is being hurt and injured, and it's going to continue that way, and that's why there's a lot of unhappiness in this country, because we've lost control of our lives. We aren't self-reliant. We say that the government is the body that's supposed to take care of us. Entitlements have become rights. But who's the government? The government is us, so they have to keep doing this, taxing and borrowing and inflating. And they have to get it from somebody else. They can't produce. All the controls go to Washington, so where's your best investment? Getting a good lobbyist. It's a necessary investment for business people to know what's going on in the tax code and how do you get some of your money back. And if you have a city, what do? You have to get a lobbyist. If you're in education, how am I going to get some of this money back? And then if real wealth is dwindling and all the control is Washington, people are just grabbing and clawing to try to get some of the wealth back as the wealth is dwindling. Now, what I talk about is getting all this out of Washington, get it back in the hands of the people. That freedom, when you talk about freedom in the true sense of the word, you bring people together. Socialism and welfarism divides people because of the system I just described. But freedom brings people together, and our rallies are really excellent because they're very diverse. People want freedom not for one reason, for different reasons. So you might have it for lifestyles. You might have it for economic reasons. You might have it for homeschoolers. You might have it for economic reasons. All kinds of different reasons. And the great thing about this campaign, and really where the excitement's coming from, and even the organization of the fundraising comes from the young people. The young people know what's going on. We criticize public education, but believe me, the young people I meet, they know their arithmetic. They have figured it out. They're inheriting a big bill, a big burden, and they know they're going to pay into Social Security for a long time, and they're probably not going to get anything out of it. And what I'm offering is a chance for the next generation to get out of Social Security and develop some self-reliance, what made America great. So this is a message that indeed brings people together, and I think it is the stimulus behind the excitement of the campaign that we have going, because it is so necessary. But the message also has a lot to do with our foreign policy. If I talk to the young people, it's very, very rare for a young person to disagree with me on the foreign policy. And I'm adamant about the foreign policy. Matter of fact, it probably was the foreign policy that got the attention, probably the first debate. You know, this message is different. But traditionally, it's been said that if you don't want to go to war, that you're paid as a far left-wing radical. And I don't come from that position. I come from a traditional, old right, constitutional position, and really a very Republican position. If you look at it over the last century, Republicans did more to try to keep us out of war and get us out of war after we were started. Think of Eisenhower being elected, Nixon being elected. Even our current president was elected on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. So to say that I have a position that's bizarre to the Republican Party just isn't true. And the young people overwhelmingly support this, not only because of the cost, the fact it's their age group that have to go over there, and they see their friends and neighbors, you know, coming home, and the casualties are unbelievable. 25% of our people on the street today are veterans. Our veterans aren't being taken care of. They're lined up. Hundreds of thousands are looking for benefits and for post-traumatic stress syndrome as well as brain injury. It goes on and on. Even if you support the war, it's not going to continue because we're going broke. All great empires end when they overextend themselves, and this is what we have done. So the signal is when empires go too far, their currencies are ruined because all wars are fought through inflation. Before, they used to either steal the gold or they would dilute the gold or clip the coins or print the paper. Now we just click a computer. But it has the same effect. Eventually, we'll be forced to live within our means. So that means the trillion-dollar operation that we have, that's $1 trillion a year to really maintain all that we do overseas, is coming to an end. But I wanted to bring it to an end gracefully, not wait for a dollar collapse and a calamity, which all other nations have gone through, because this is unsustainable. That is, I want the foreign policy of the Founding Fathers. No entangling alliances, friendship with people, trade with people, no sanctions. We should be trading with Cuba. We should 45 years sanctions to get rid of Castro. He looks like he outlived our, that whole process. And it's time we change our attitude about this. We shouldn't have sanctions on these countries. We're looking for a war with the Iranians. And now we know they're not even building a weapon. They haven't been doing it for 4 years. And yet we want to go to war with them, and we have sanctions on them. We have our Navy there threatening them, and nobody, the other candidates don't even want to take a nuclear first strike off the table against the Iranians. It makes no sense. The same thing, this whole war was concocted to go against the Iraqis. I mean, they were no threat to us, nothing to do with 9/11, no weapons of mass destruction, all this death and destruction. We blow up their bridges, we're taxed for that, then we're taxed to rebuild their bridges, and our own bridges are falling down, and we have this national debt that's, right now, if you recently looked at the deficit, it's doing this. Revenues are going down, and the spending continues. This week we're working on a budget in Washington. We want, the executive branch, the Republicans want more money for this warfare state, more money for the military-industrial complex. The Democrats want more money for welfare. That's the problem. But they say they don't work together in Washington. That is not true. They work together very well. They've come up with a neat little compromise. They're going to increase both. It makes no sense. We got to look to our traditions. We got to understand what this country is all about. We got to live within the rule of law. We shouldn't go to war unless the war is declared. Then we should all be behind it, fight it, win it, and get it over with and come home. But instead, we have these perpetual, endless political wars. We go to war under UN resolutions, and they never end. And unfortunately, it will end badly unless we get control of things, get control of our government. And it's not that this is a radical idea. This is a traditional American idea emphasizing the importance of liberty, the importance of understanding that you have the incentive and the motivation to go out and work. You have a right to your life. You have a right to your liberty. We ought to have the right to keep the fruits of our labor, and that's where capital comes from. Capital can't come out of a computer by the Federal Reserve, and that's what we do. We don't save money. Savings have to be the source of true capital. That's where you get the correct information to have a booming economy. So we do, in spite of the prosperity today, we face serious troubles because our prosperity today is like if your banker was generous and loaned you $1 million a month to consume, and he never called your loan until after 3 years. Your standard of living would be very high, but when your notes are called and he quits loaning you money, you have to live below that standard of living. You have to go back to work and pay the bills. And that is what we're moving into. We're going to have to pay the bills. The answers are easily found, and they're wonderful, and they're American, they're very conservative, they're constitutional. If we do them, believe me, if we had this system of government, this system of foreign policy, it wouldn't take us long. I think we'd all go back to work. Even if the bills had to be paid and our standard of living would go down, I would say it wouldn't take long. We'd be back to work and we'd be over in a year or so. But right now, the standard of living is going down. Unfortunately, it's for the people that we're pretending to help the most, and that's the poor and the middle class. So my vote is for freedom. And the message is clear. And I hope that the support that we're getting is a reflection not so much about me. It's not about me as much as it is about this message and the need for it to be heard. So I am continuing with this message, and I cannot tell you exactly what will happen in this campaign or in the election. But I do know that if we continue on our same course, that we're going to have devastating problems. I am excited about it, because there have been so many. I am especially excited about the young people willing to look at this and say, this is a grand idea, and this is what we need to do. The vote for me is a vote for freedom. Thank you very much.
The congressman will take questions from the audience. We just ask that you wait until the microphones get to you before you ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. And I have thought that it's really exciting and interesting how much the generation that I belong to has really got into your message. And I wanted to take a second and ask you about, I know that you talked about no first strike.
About what?
No first strike would...
Oh, no first strike, right?
And under the Constitution, I was wondering if you would actually talk a little bit about the connection between nuclear power and nuclear weapons proliferation and the ideas behind that, because with the Non-Proliferation Treaty of '68, we said that other countries can have peaceful atom, using it for nuclear power, but also with that enrichment process, it brings you that many steps closer to having a nuclear weapon. And I was just wondering if you could do that.
Okay.
And also if you could sign the egg, because everybody here wants one.
Okay. Yes, I did make the statement that we should have no first strike, matter of fact, no first strike nuclear or conventional weapons, because it doesn't make any sense. A president has a responsibility to, retaliate against an attack. I don't think there's been a good example of a need to do that throughout our whole history. But it was especially true in the early years that if Congress was way off and they had to come by horse and buggy, the president had the responsibility, the moral and the legal responsibility to thwart an attack on the United States. That still is the position I would hold. But that's quite different than starting a war. So I would say no first strikes. It should be done with a declaration of war, and not with the Congress reneging on their responsibility by transferring this power to the president, which Congress did, and just said to the president, if you feel like it, do it. If you don't, you don't have to. But if you do it, we'll pay for it. And it was the worst of circumstances. So although I'm critical of the administration for taking us to war, I'm almost more critical of the Congress for reneging on their responsibilities, because Congress should have stood up to it and said, we either declare a war or not. Matter of fact, I made our International Relations Committee vote on a declaration of war. Nobody voted for it, including myself, but they didn't want that responsibility. On nuclear power, I support nuclear power. I think it's very good. I think it's clean and it's safe compared to the others. Yet I want the government as far away removed from nuclear power. I would like to have seen a lot more development. Because of the restrictions, they haven't been able to develop. But the Non-Proliferation Treaty is something that is in existence, and we have severely bent the rules on that and have not followed them as we should. Matter of fact, Iran has been a better follower of the Non-Proliferation Treaty than we have been, and because we would never expose ourselves to what we expect other countries to do. But they have an established international right to enrich for peaceful purposes. And now that our own government, as well as the UN inspector, said that they have not worked on a weapon since 2003, they're really within the international law. And that is sad. So if there is an international agreement that they're not going to continue the process and enrichment to produce nuclear weapons, I think they should be allowed to. So we have literally violated that treaty and imposed it on them. And unfortunately, the demagogue Ahmadinejad has made it easier for us to get away with that, but he's a loudmouth, and he's going to have trouble getting reelected, and really doesn't speak for the people because the mullahs really run the show over there. So there's a distortion there. But the truth is they do have the right under the treaty to pursue this, and yet we tell them you absolutely do not have this right, and that is not true. We're violating the treaty when we tell them that.
There was a long article in the New York Times yesterday basically attributing the housing mess that we're in right now to Alan Greenspan around the 2001-2002 time period. What's your position? Do you think that Greenspan could have done more to get us out of this housing bubble? And as a follow-up on that, do you think that this is going to put the country into, many people believe that we're in recession already. Many economists believe that we're heading for a recession perhaps within the next 6 months. Do you believe that that's true, and how deep of a recession do you think that this country's facing?
Yes, I think we're in the early stages. If you're in the housing business or the mortgage business dealing with that, you might feel like you're in a depression. And if you're losing your house, you're in a depression. But nationally, and the statistics will eventually catch up, I think we will have one, because all monetary inflations, periods of monetary inflation, always leads to a recession or depression. And it's just a matter of time, and you never know the timing. But the longer you go without a correction, the worse the correction is. And the more interference you do with the correction, the market always wants to liquidate debt. Governments and politicians don't want to, and that was our problem in the 30s. We pushed this up, and we interfered too much and didn't allow the liquidation. Now,
we're not seeing inflation yet. The CPI is not showing the.
Yeah, well, there's two things. First, the CPI is totally unreliable. If you go to the old recording of the CPI, it's 8 or 10%. People still measure it by the old CPI, and a CPI is very generalized because if you're retired and you're on Social Security and you have heating bills and a medical bill and a repair bill, your inflation rate might be 15%. The inflation has to be measured by the increase in the money supply. That's the dilution of the value of the dollar. It's the malinvestment that is the real evil, the pumping up certain industries. But in housing, I mean, we had horrendous inflation in housing prices. So when the government inflates the currency, all prices don't go up the same. Electronics go down in price. Computers, still you can get deals. Prices go down, cell phones go down. At the same time, when governments direct where the money might go, say into medicine, cost goes up. It might go into financials. It might go into education. And our housing programs. You have the misdirection from the excess of credit, which is the most serious problem. But then on top of that, you have the housing programs that said you will make these loans. They're talking about the subprime loans, but by law, these banks have to make some of these loans. You can't discriminate, so they force people to go in and make bad loans, and then we have to bail them out. So that means there's more money flowing into it, and that's why prices of houses, go up much faster than the cost of rent. Matter of fact, you know what they did, like CPI, during all those increases in the cost of a house, they didn't even put cost of houses. That's not even in the CPI. But Alan Greenspan, it isn't so much that he didn't do enough to deal with the housing bubble. He created it. It was his low interest rates of 1%, which generated very low interest rates. So that fed through the market, and we had our interest rates down to 4.5% on a mortgage. In this age when the dollar is losing its value, I mean, this was astronomically low, and people do the wrong things because the information you need to get to make an investment is to find out how much people are saving. We don't save, so everything is artificial, and that's when people make mistakes. And people made mistakes buying houses when they shouldn't have, and they were many times tricked into it with promises of a wonderfully low mortgage payment that they don't emphasize in 2 years you're going to have to pay a lot more. So it was a combination of housing programs and policies as well as the low interest rate. So the prevention is much better than the cure because the cure is just devastating because the cure is allowing the market to liquidate bad debt. That's what the market wants. Politicians say keep the bubble going, and that's where we are today. And they're bailing out. I mean, what was this operation just last week? The $90 billion project of all the international central banks. I mean, this is very big. The other big change on monetary policy, we don't quite yet see the evidence. It has been the opening up of the discount window. The discount window has always been used for banks on their last legs. They can go and they can borrow. And it's always been, oh, my bank's in trouble. I don't want to borrow from the discount window. But now they've changed that whole attitude. Please come to the discount window. Bring us all your bad debt. Bring your mortgage securities. We'll take anything. And they can get bailed out, and banks have still been reluctant. And that is what they're trying to do. That's why they are facilitating. They're changing the nature of the discount bank so they need that in addition to just lowering overnight rates. And that's just inflation. And this is what I got after Bernanke for the other day. I said, how can you solve the problems of inflation with more inflation? The markets wants deflation. It's politically unacceptable. That's why I expect more erosion of your dollar. Okay, go ahead if you have somebody there. I see in the middle back there. There we go.
It seems that Bush hasn't really done anything.
A little bit louder and microphone up.
Seems that George Bush hasn't really done anything for office. Do you think So do you think our country's ready for another Republican president?
How about another Republican president from Texas? Well, I guess if it's a different kind of Republican, if it's a traditional Republican, a constitutional Republican, somebody that wants to change the foreign policy and who wants to fulfill the promises of George Bush of the year 2000 about a humble foreign policy, I would think that whether they're from Texas or whether they're a Republican or Democrat, I think the country is ready for that. Okay, go ahead.
Since you're a physician, I would be interested in hearing how you would address the spiraling cost of health care. Mayor Giuliani seems to feel that tort reform would do the trick. Governor Huckabee seems to feel that focusing on wellness is a positive direction, and Governor Romney seems to feel that mandatory health care insurance is the way to go. So I'd be interested to hear what a doctor has to say.
You cannot, and this is a big problem, and probably second or third in the number of concerns that the people are talking about is medical care. You cannot talk about the cost of medical care without addressing the subject of basic monetary inflation. Same as housing. You know, you pump money into it, and the government programs do it. You have the money out there, and cost goes up. So costs are going up because of inflation, and you can't solve all that problem unless you deal with monetary policy and deficit financing. But government tax code has been the real culprit, and the takeover of medicine by government since 1965, especially since the early 1970s, with our tax code and ERISA laws that mandated that large corporations provide certain types of services at the same time they got the tax benefits, where the small companies and individuals did not have the same benefits. And it caused a distortion. It caused prices to rise to the point now where the corporations want to get out of it, and that's why they get behind prescription drug programs so that they can dump some of their responsibilities on the government or the taxpayers. So one intervention leads to more problems and more intervention, and that's where we are. So most people recognize that we have a mess in medical care. We have corporate medicine today, corporatism. We have put somebody between the doctor and the patient. I've no longer had the control over what I do for my patients. I have to call some clerk in California belonging to an insurance company to decide what kind of surgery we're going to have. I mean, it's a horror in practicing medicine, but it's costly too. They say that that's to cut down on costs. But the corporations make a lot of money. That's why they spend a lot of money lobbying. So once we notice the problem, now there's a clamor for even some of the Republicans saying what we need is a single health payer. And that's socialized medicine. They call it single health payer, but they're talking about socialized medicine. Most Americans don't believe in socialism. Some people don't believe in socialism except for medicine because they think medicine is distinctly different and that the market can't provide it. But the mess that we have now could be corrected by changing those tax laws, making sure that the individual gets the benefit, not the large corporations. Make sure that every single dollar you spend on medical care can be written off or have these health savings accounts where you get the money, young people especially, they ought to get the money, put it in the bank, not have to pay taxes on that money, not pay taxes on what it earns, and let them pay for their services. We don't have insurance. If you can have an insurance policy that says you only have to pay $5 to see the doctor or $5 to go to the pharmacy, that's not insurance. That's prepaid services. That can't, the insurance company can't measure risk. Insurance should measure risk. Accidents and catastrophic problems and intensive care and hospitalizations. And then an individual who could put their savings aside could buy these major medical policies. But we have lost our way here because we lost our confidence, and not many Americans believe that people would be taken care of. But I happen to believe that. It happened before. People weren't out on the streets. I can remember working in a hospital for a couple dollars an hour in the 1960s before all this started. It was a church hospital, and nobody was turned away. Nobody was put on Medicaid immediately. Today, everybody's put on some program, a government program, and then do you think that the hospitals then charge the least? No, you charge the most. And because of the cost of increase, the inflation, the hospitals have trouble making it. Then we come along and we put mandates on these hospitals. In the South, you know, there are mandates that you take care of every single person, legal or illegal. Hospitals are going broke. It's too much government interference. We have to wean ourselves off. We can't close the system down overnight, but we ought to get people out of the system and relieve the burden. I don't believe, my transitional program is that I wouldn't turn anybody out in the street. I wouldn't deny medical benefits on individuals who have become dependent, but I would not raise the spending level. I would not raise taxes. I would save it elsewhere. We need to take care of our people at home and, you know, save this money from overseas. But I think it's the tax code and these changes as encouragement, get control back to the patient, would do a lot to help the situation.
If you're elected, what would be your 3 most urgent priorities after taking office?
What are my 3 most urgent priorities after taking office? Probably the first one would be to end the war and to announce to the world that we have a different foreign policy, that move the Navy away from the shores of Iran and don't threaten them and remove the sanctions. It would change the nature of everything going on in the world. And with this effort, people would, I think, take a sigh of relief. I believe interest rates would not go up. I believe oil prices would probably drop just because there would be less likelihood that we're in a war in Iran, and that war would not be spreading. So that would be high on the priority. The second priority would be talking to the Congress to, to develop a rapport with Congress to know where I stood on these issues and what they have to do to get these bills passed. And it really is a program where I can talk to other people, just as I mentioned on medical care. It's not for closing down these programs as much as finding places to save it. I just think it's so much better to save money overseas than it is to attack our programs here at home or not give adequate care to our veterans. And then overall, the major task to take the pressure off taxes and inflation is to strive for reducing overall spending so that we can get back to not only a balanced budget, but start nibbling away at the deficit. And I think just the announcement in that direction would change the nature of things completely and totally. Diplomacy would be quite different around the world under an administration like that.
Last question.
How about, go ahead. We'll take one of the kids back there. Since they're the backbone.
How will you help bring the troops home?
Oh, how would I help bring the troops home? You know, a lot of things that I would like to do, since I'm a strict constitutionalist, and I always want, and it was mentioned in my introduction, I want to limit the power and scope of the executive branch. There's a lot of things I have to get done with the Congress. You know, some of these programs change the tax code, and I would recognize that. But the president is the commander-in-chief. So the president has the authority. There's not a declared war, and we could start bringing our troops home. See, I'm not for just bringing the troops home from Iraq, which we should. You can't do it in a day or a week or a month, but within months you could. But the announcement would be so important. But I'm not talking about bringing troops home from the Middle East. I'm talking about how long are we going to be in Korea? Yeah, they've been there since I was in high school. Vietnam, we left Vietnam. Vietnam is so much better off. We trade with them. We're friends with them. The domino theory didn't work. And they said if we ever left, it would turn all communist. We have achieved in peace with Vietnam what we couldn't achieve in war. The French and Americans fought in Vietnam all those years. A couple million Vietnamese were killed. Then we finally lost the war. We came home. Now we're following the founders' advice. We trade with them. We talk to them. The president of Vietnam comes here, and we invest over there. But I want something like that to happen in Korea. We've stayed in Korea. The North and the South actually want to come together. We won't allow it. So I want to bring the troops home from Korea, come home from Japan, come home from Europe. What are we doing? We pay our troops over there. They spend all their money over there. So just bringing them home. Why do we close our bases down here and build bases in Saudi Arabia, which motivates the radicals? Osama bin Laden was motivated by building this huge air base in Saudi Arabia. We have 14 new bases going up in Iraq, an embassy bigger than the Vatican. I, as a president, would have the ability to shift that focus and bring the troops home, save not $1 million, not $1 billion, not $100 billion, hundreds of billions of dollars. We would have a stronger national defense, and there would be a lot better chance for peace and prosperity in this country. Thank you very much.
Congressman Paul, thank you for joining us on the New Hampshire primary campaign trail, and there's a little something to keep you warm as you continue through the winter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes this morning's installment of Politics and Eggs. Have a good day.
Come in. Do you see that reflected in the polls already?
I haven't followed the polls that close, so I just do what I have to do. So the polls aren't all that revealing. I think that the national polls haven't showed me, right up at the top, but most of the people are new people and have not been called, and they're independents, not Republicans, that will be supporting me.
You're so confident you'll be inaugurated in January?
I don't talk in those terms. I just do my best, and we'll see what happens. I think it's too early to make predictions. I know a lot of people believe that's a very strong possibility.
Can you explain to the people in Europe how you would change America's position in the world, the foreign policy of this country?
Just talking to people. Hello there. I'd like to be able to shake hands with these people.
Mr. Paul, a couple quick questions for you.
Here you are. Thank you. Okay. Hello there. All right.
We were curious. The new WMUR poll shows you have single digits. You said that you still feel good about the campaign. Explain a little bit.
Well, how could I not feel good? When you get 57,000 people in one day send the money, 25,000 brand new people join the campaign, how could I do anything other than feel good about it? Maybe the polls aren't accurate. Maybe the fundraising and the support I'm getting is a lot more accurate measurement of the strength of the campaign.
Are you hoping then that things turn around very quickly here in these last couple weeks?
Well, I don't think there's any turning around. I think it's just continuing the momentum. I mean, I don't have to turn anything around. We started slowly, and the momentum keeps building, and there's no sign that the momentum is slowing up. So, to me, it's just to continue to do what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Dr.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Sir, what are you doing on that money?
Well, my obligation is to spend it for what they sent it to, and that is to campaign with. We increased our spending in the early primaries. We have plenty. And then to be prepared for running campaigns in 20 states. We're in good position to hello there, thank you, to run, on Super Tuesday. So that's my obligation. That's what the money was sent for.
How much more of that money do you think will be spent in New Hampshire itself?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
Continuing a major investment in the state?
Oh, sure. I mean, this is a key state. We're spending a lot here, and I've been here in New Hampshire more than any other state.
You know, a lot of people have said, well, you got all this money over the weekend, and it was great. It was a big boost. A lot of people are calling it a stunt, saying that it's a way to make up for the fact that it didn't come in over a larger period. Your reaction to that?
A grand stunt. Pretty interesting. If they write it off as a stunt, I would say that somebody's been misled.
Sir, what do you hope to accomplish with the TV on Sunday in Des Moines?
On
Sunday in Des Moines. I think you're at statewide.
You mean that 30-minute program?
Yes, sir.
Oh, just more spreading of the view and exposure to more people, because it's a full explanation of everything that I've been doing.
I don't mean to get ahead a little bit, but if you do not win this primary race, will you run as an independent?
I don't plan to do that. I have no intention of doing that.
Anything else on your mind?
Signing eggs. Here you are.
Proud to be part of the revolution.
Hey, there you go. Hello, I'm glad you're here. Hey.
I just have a quick question for you. I know you went to the little girl at the end. I heard that you wanted to close down the FBI. Is that true? And do you think that there should...
No, not in reality, but I'm a strong critic of the FBI and the CIA because I don't like what they do. The CIA, and especially, they fight secret wars. They get involved in elections. They serve the interests of big business frequently. And we've had the CIA, of course, get involved in the Vietnam War, the killing of Diem. Our CIA is right now trying to overthrow Ahmadinejad. I don't like that. It's clandestine. I'm not against the intelligence gathering. The FBI has to be, very closely watched. I don't like the FBI spying on American citizens without search warrants. Sure. I don't like the FBI spying on people like Martin Luther King because he disagrees with the establishment. So, but I'm not against, the supposed nature of these organizations. But I'd be much closer to getting rid of the CIA and having intelligence gathering in a different method, maybe military intelligence, and not having this very secret, unregulated, unmonitored organization. That is what I oppose. The FBI, there's some legitimate functions of the FBI, but even that, they go too far, and I would want to rein them in.
Well, thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
It's probably...
I know.
Next on C-SPAN, John Edwards campaigns at an opera house in Lebanon, New Hampshire. And later, actor Morgan Freeman discusses the impact of severe storms on coastal areas.
With the presidential primary set to begin in less than 2 weeks, beginning with the January 3rd Iowa caucus, here's where some of the candidates are today.